Welcome to Cosmic Scene with Jill Jardine. I'm your host, Jill Jardine, Master's in Counseling Psychology, professional astrologer, psychic healer, and yogi. In this episode, I will explain the significance of Saturn transiting into Pisces, beginning March 2023 through February 2026. Stay tuned until the end of the episode when I explain what it means for each zodiac sign. Welcome to the episode on Saturn transiting Pisces. I'll call it the Planetary Piscean paradigm shift. It occurs in March 2023, but I'm giving listeners a 2 months heads up to prepare and get ready. It's a big deal astrologically because it's thrown into a cosmic blender with several significant astro events in March 2023. And when Saturn transits into Pisces on March 7th, 2023, it's going to be there until February 2026. So all this other astro energy coincides in March 2023, creating big shifts. These shifts will affect us personally and collectively as two outer planets are changing signs in the same month. This heralds new energies pouring into the collective. Saturn seeps into Pisces on the same day of the Pisces Virgo full moon, which is March 7th, and then opens up the energy for a busy Aries equinox. March 20th, 21st of March is the new moon in Aries, and then Pluto shifts signs into Aquarius on March 23rd. Check out my previous podcast, Ascension and Energetic Updates in early 2023 for more details. There will also be an upcoming separate podcast on the significance of Pluto transiting into a new sign, Aquarius, after 14 years in Capricorn. So let me unpack this upcoming approximately 3-year transit of Saturn through Pisces, which will occur from March 7th, 2023 through February 2026. So on March 7th, 2023, Saturn enters Pisces. Then on May 24th, 2025, Saturn shifts into the sign Aries. However, Saturn returns to Pisces on September 1st, 2025, and stays in the Piscean plethora until February 13th, 2026, when Saturn enters Aries and stays there for several years. But before I get into what might happen in the upcoming Saturn transit in Pisces and speculate on that, let's go back through the astrological history and muse on the past transits of Saturn in Pisces. And here they were. So the most previous transit of Saturn in Pisces went from May 1993 through April 1996. So think about what was going on in your life if you were alive then, or even if you were being born then. That was the last time Saturn was in Pisces. And then if we look at the Saturn in Pisces transit before that, it was from March 23rd, 1964 through March 1967. Then, previous to that transit of Saturn in Pisces, we have to go all the way back into the 1930s, from February 14th, 1935 through April 25th, 1937, and again, October 17th, 1937 to January 14th, 1938. So we have 3 reference times of when Saturn last went through Pisces. Now, if you were born during any of these times, stay tuned because that means you have Saturn in Pisces in your natal birth chart, which means you will be experiencing your Saturn return when Saturn goes into Pisces in 2023 to 2026. I'll explain that later in this episode. So the most recent Saturn in Pisces transit was from May 1993 through April 1996. Think about what was happening in your life then. Where were you living? What were your aspirations? What significant events occurred in your life during this time period? If you were young, Think about what was happening in the lives of your parents or family during this cycle. Pisces is sometimes considered a sign of dissolution, as our physical reality can feel like it is dissolving in some way, and we have to turn to our spiritual life. I remember that time in the mid 90s in my own life, and it was a very spiritualizing cycle for me. However, I did have my first marriage dissolve. I also went through some very powerful trainings in healing and hypnotherapy and emerged as a certified hypnotherapist in that cycle, as well as prepared to leave my day job at Harvard University to immerse in my astrological counseling and hypnotherapy practice consistently. By the way, Pisces rules altered states of consciousness, including hypnotic states. It was a very good time to do my hypnotherapy trainings and then start a practice. Some of the collective highlights that occurred in those years when Saturn previously transited Pisces are Kurt Cobain, the lead singer and guitarist with Nirvana, committed suicide, allegedly. He was born during the previous transit of Saturn in Pisces in the 60s and died just before his Saturn return, weirdly enough. There was the time in that cycle in the mid 90s when France tested nuclear bombs in the Pacific Ocean, and everybody was really concerned about that. China began surface to surface missile testing and military exercises off the Taiwan coast, which is concerning because now, a Saturn return cycle later, China is up to the same old shenanigans, messing around with Taiwan again and doing those same kind of military exercises. Very unsettling to the rest of the world. Speaking of nuclear issues during that mid 1990 Saturn cycle, the Australian government agreed to pay reparations to Indigenous Australians who were displaced during nuclear tests in the earlier Saturn cycle in the 60s and 50s. Very interesting how all of this stuff starts coming around. Whatever was going on in a previous Saturn cycle. And this includes whether it's going through Pisces or Aquarius or any sign. It tends to be a weird 29 to 30 years later follow-up. So if we look at that mid 1990 Saturn and Pisces cycle, there was a lot of lifting of boundaries that occurred when Saturn went through Pisces. And with Saturn and Pisces, borders and boundaries can be more permeable. Some boundary lifting and shifting occurred when the Church of England ordained the first female priests, breaking barriers in the all-male old boys club. And then in Europe, there was an agreement that allowed easy cross-border travel in the European Union. And the Channel Tunnel, the channel also opened, connecting Britain to France during that time. So here we have some boundaries shifting and access easier in certain ways. Things that were not available as far as boundaries or borders become open. The other thing about that time, which I remember fondly, was the New Age was in full force. Everyone was reading Deepak Chopra and reading Doreen Virtue's angel cards. Although later she renounced all her New Age involvement when she became a born-again Christian. Okay, Doreen, why don't you give back all that money you made on your angel cards, your dolphin cards, your fairy cards, etc.? And remember, in this Saturn and Pisces cycle that occurred from 1993 through 1996, it was before the internet really took off. And all this interaction, especially with the New Age and holistic and metaphysical movement, was in person. No overnight internet shamans back then. You had to be legit and had to do it in person. It was a fun time with New Age and metaphysical bookstores, healing trainings, retreats, holistic expos. It was all in person, and strong connections and transmissions occurred, which has been lost with the advent of internet spirituality. Back in the mid 1990s, this was a time when New Age spirituality finally went mainstream, and there was a huge burst of interest in esoteric religions, astrology, paganism, goddess worship, Vedic teachings. Yoga started to open up, and yoga centers opened up all around the United States and the world. We had amazing whole health expos back then, and I was right there in the front lines giving lectures and having a booth every year at the Boston Whole Health Expo. I was smack in the middle of all this burgeoning new age, and my astrology professional practice was booming. I still have people who come to see me from that time who told me of the accuracy of the readings and how I predicted their children's future, and the children who were yet to be born and are now in their 20s. I remember we were doing crazy things like constructing big copper sacred geometric grids adorned with crystals and doing incredible healing sessions in them. I had one of these big sacred geometric grids in my home. We called it the Star Chamber, and people had visitation from the Pleiadians. They went back to past lives instantaneously and had spontaneous healings. Wow, I guess I really do miss that time period. The New Age bookstores were fabulous. So many more existed than they do now. It was a wild time when Saturn transited Pisces in the mid 1990s, and I'm excited to see what this new level brings. If we go back to the earlier cycle of Saturn in Pisces from March 23rd, 1964 through March 1967, this was also a trippy time. It was that transition time from the early 1960s. Think of early Beatles, mop tops in matching suit. I Want to Hold Your Hand, to the Beatles going psychedelic, hanging out with Mahesh Yogi on his ashram in India with Donovan, Mike Love, and Mia Farrow, taking up Eastern spirituality, and then transiting into their taking LSD and psychedelics, which then later influenced their music and album covers. Think of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Or think of the early Beach Boys, California Girl, Surfer Girl, into Pet Sounds and the didgeridoos playing in the orchestra in the background. Or just watch the movie Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story, which shows the main character as a musician and his transition from the early 1960s music to the late 1960s, that Saturn and Pisces transition. This cycle also coincides with the most prolific cycle of the Beatles' music and their rise to fame and fortune. So we can anticipate that there will be a musical revolution when Saturn's in Pisces, because Pisces has a rulership over music. Big cultural shifts occurred during this 1960s Saturn and Pisces cycle because it also coincided with a major astrological conjunction of the outer planets Uranus and Pluto in 1966 through 1967 in the sign Virgo, which opposed the Saturn in Pisces, and people born there have that signature in their natal astrological charts. There was revolutionary activity. When we get our next Saturn and Pisces cycle, we will also be having Pluto in Aquarius, the revolutionary sign, in 2023 onward. So we're going to have to buckle up with the revolutionary intensity. And going back to the 1960s transit of Saturn through Pisces, there was worldwide government and military coup and uprising against those in power. The Vietnam War escalated, and there were massive anti-war protests around the world. There were civil rights marches and race riots in the U.S. Black Power was on the rise, and Martin Luther King led the Selma to Montgomery marches in 1965, and the Black Panther Party was formed in 1966. Lyndon B. Johnson introduced spending programs to reduce poverty and racial injustice called the Great Society, and the Civil Rights Bill was passed in 1964, which abolished racial segregation in the U.S. The Voting Rights passed in 1965, prohibiting racial discrimination in voting, and the Social Security Act established Medicare and Medicaid. The Cultural Revolution began in China when the CCP issued the May 16th notice in 1966 to justify the purges and forced reforms. There were also many floods around the world during this cycle as well. Let's not forget, Pisces is a water sign. It breaks barriers. That's what floods do. This was the beginning of the peace, free love, sex, and rock and roll and drug revolution. Hippies were rampant, flower power was blooming, and the human being occurred in January 1967, precursor to the summer of love in 1967. So the Saturn transit of Pisces during the 1960s was a groovy time. If we look at what happened during these two previous transits of Saturn through Pisces, we see some recurring keynotes. They are freedom, revolution, breaking boundaries and barriers, consciousness shifts in the populations, the spread of the ideas of peace, love, rock and roll, and the spiritual ways of awakening among the collective. I'll be elucidating more on these themes later in the podcast, but you might be wondering what it means if you were born during these Saturn and Pisces cycles. If you're born during any of these times, stay tuned. That means you have Saturn and Pisces in your natal birth chart, which means you are experiencing your Saturn return. This is a very significant astrological cycle in one's life. We experience a Saturn return between 28 to 30 years old. So the group born between May 1993 through April 1996 will be experiencing their first Saturn return. Good luck. People born between March 1964 through March 1967 are experiencing their second Saturn return as they push up against the big 6-0. 60. And the group born between February 1935 and January 1938, well, they're experiencing their third Saturn return as they push up against the big 90, and they've seen it all. They are living embodiments of Saturn if they made it to 88 to 90 years old. Saturn is the Lord of time and aging. They say in astrology, if we pay our karmic dues throughout life, Saturn becomes our friend as we get older. The planet Saturn was named after the Roman deity Saturn, whose Greek counterpart was Kronos. In both Roman and Greek mythology, these deities are known as the Lord of Time, sometimes referred to as the Grim Reaper, and the Lord of Karma. Saturn has a rulership over structure and form and time and order. Saturn, as Lord of Time, determines how much time we have in this incarnation in this body. Saturn has rulership over the aging process. The soul has to embody into form to incarnate in this lifetime, and that is Saturn's domain. Basically, our soul is coming into physical form. So at the Saturn return, people wake up to the limitations of life and embodiment in a physical body. They can also experience major psychological and emotional transformation. Saturn can be a taskmaster, looking to simplify and fine-tune our lives so we can follow our soul's dharmic path or destiny. Saturn looks at practical ways to redefine our lives and demands that we be truthful to ourselves. Saturn tests, not to be a Debbie Downer, but to help polish the gem that is our character and self. Saturn will reveal weak areas that need strengthening. Saturn takes its time, and this is a good thing. Saturn will teach many lessons along the way. Eventually and ideally, we understand that it is only ourselves who we can control. So what can we expect when Saturn transits through Pisces from March 7th, 2023 through 2026? Well, Saturn is the planet of form, and Pisces is the spiritual sign of the formless. Pisces rules the 12th house in astrology, the house of karma and undoing, and the nebulous. Karma comes home to roost. From March 2023 until February 2026, Saturn will make orders of the ethers of technology, culture, spirituality, pharmacology, and more. As I described, Saturn is the ruler of form and likes structures and boundaries. And Pisces is the sign of permeable boundaries as symbolized by its ruling element, mutable water, and its totem archetype, the two fishes swimming the ocean. When immersed and swimming in the ocean, there seems as there is no boundary to when the ocean ends. So with Saturn and Pisces, we will witness structures being changed or dissolved, boundaries being pushed beyond limits, people uprising against structures that restrict or limit them. The good news is there will be an infusion of spiritual energies from higher sources, and many will be able to connect to their higher self or spiritual source more than ever before. Pisces is the archetype of merging with spiritual forces, but it lacks the discernment of its polar opposite sign, Virgo. And that merging may also be with something outside of oneself, including of merging into a relationship, that's called codependency, or merging with unwholesome forces. In its high vibration, Pisces can be considered as a spiritual sign. In its lower vibration, it is more addictive and codependent. So we will see a rise in drug use, alcoholism, addiction, which has already risen substantially due to COVID isolation. We may see more overdosing and drug use in general in attempts to escape. Pisces is a sign of escapism, so people will look for a fast escape hatch, whether through alcohol or drug addiction or fake spirituality, cults, false teachers, or teachings. There will be a crisis in traditional religions such as Catholicism, as their teachings may be considered outdated or restricted, or requiring too much from their devotees. The traditional Catholic Church views of prohibiting abortions and stem cell research will be challenged by opponents outside the church. In astrology, Pisces is said to rule the spiritual body while Virgo rules the physical body. So if we want to look at the effect of Saturn and Pisces in the realm of health, I predict there will be rampant viruses, COVID, and more. Viruses are very Piscean because you can't see them, and they are transmitted among people and populations without anyone noticing. There will be an increase in undiagnosed illnesses where medical doctors can't find the cause. There will be more elusive health issues and more spontaneous deaths. And more deaths and dying in general because Pisces is the last zodiac sign and it signifies endings. Also regarding viruses and COVID, they will not go away during this time period because viruses are very Piscean in nature. You can't see their boundary and they are elusive and invisible. In fact, there will be a continuation of ongoing COVID symptoms because it mutates and permeates different organ systems in the body. And unless the immune system is boosted in practical ways that align naturally with the body, not an outside lab-made medical intervention that is experimental, a virus can be boosted by certain toxins that are actually in the medical intervention and thereby continue to elude the immunity response. Unless you are a psychic, clairvoyant, or can read energies, most can't read the energy signature of a virus or elusive disease or illness. Pisces in astrology rules the 12th house, which indicates the end of life. I predict that people, especially the baby boomers who will be aging out and dying, will want to choose their end of life care in different ways, including using cannabis and psychedelic mushrooms to ease pain and reach higher states of consciousness before death. More attention in the mainstream about end of life care and end of life issues will be focused on things like hospice, death, dying, death doulas, just like their birth doulas, there'll be death doulas, and the spirituality of death, such as from the Tibetan Book of Death and Dying by a Lama. These issues aren't really addressed in our Western society, and they will become more predominant. There will also be a big surge in mainstream seeking spirituality, but we cannot be convinced that they will all be true teachings because there will also be a rise in fake shamans and spiritual charlatans because Neptune is the ruler of Pisces and it also rules deception and delusion. So there will be more scams, spiritual, financial, and otherwise. This coincides with the economic recession, so watch out for all those scammers out there who want to take your money. We may also see a breakdown in the power grids. The power grids are invisible boundaries in most cases, and in that respect can be very Piscean. There will be more interference in the power grids, either by hacking or other means. Because Pisces is a water sign, we will see more water issues in the weather, such as inundations, flooding, tsunamis, hail, blizzards, and ice storms, frozen water. There will be more lack of water due to droughts and low water levels. Production of pure water becomes a focus. Purification of water we drink and the oceans will become big topics. Inventions to purify water and the oceans will be introduced and hopefully implemented into the world. Pisces is the astrological archetype representing dreams, fantasy, spirituality, and myths. It represents the realm of imagery, dreams, and feelings. Therefore, we will see more advances in movies and films where they will become more mystical, spiritual, and dreamlike. The film industry will go through a renaissance with inspiring movies and hopefully less violence. The planetary ruler of Pisces is Neptune, and both have a connection to music. Music will become more inspiring and mystical and less harsh and jarring. Think of heart solfeggio frequency 528. There's been a lot of research about how music that resonates at the 528 frequency is soothing to the heart, meditative, and reduces stress. Dream work, stress release, meditation, mindfulness, and yoga will all have a big comeback as music and sound will be integrated into wellness pursuits. Any spiritual practices can be enhanced while Saturn is in Pisces. It's a perfect time to look inward. Connect with your creative and spiritual self. If we know which house in our natal chart holds Pisces, we can prepare for the next few years to see where there will be some new developments in our lives. Also, if we know we have planets in Pisces, those planets and their archetypal energies will be activated. This is a great time to consult your favorite astrologer, Jill Jardine. We all have the sign Pisces somewhere in our charts, so that area will be tested by Saturn. Stay tuned to see what Saturn means for each sun sign from March 7, 2023 through 2026. Here's the part of the episode you've been waiting for. What does the Saturn in Pisces transit mean for your sun sign? Let's start with those on the hot seat. Pisces, tag you're at Pisces. Saturn will spend the best part of the next 3 years traveling through your sign. You will be tested for sure, but you will emerge wiser and more mature. You may lose something that is dear to you. Everything in your life will be reevaluated to see if it is worth keeping. That means relationships will be tested to see if they can hold up with these new energies affecting you personally. Are your relationships supportive to who you're becoming in your life? Also, please take good care of your health. Symptoms or issues can arise, so don't put off getting medical attention or seeing your health practitioners. Your very being will go through a spiritual renaissance. Aries, Saturn is transiting through your house of karma. So as the karmic lord, Saturn will teach lessons and may give you something or take it away. You may suffer some losses in your life that were unexpected. However, if you have been more giving and loving to others, Saturn will reward you with unexpected gifts. Watch for self-sabotage tendencies. This could be a very powerful spiritual time for you when you witness miracles and see the strong connection between the physical plane and spiritual realms. Taurus, Saturn transits your house of friends, associations, groups, and the future. Use the discipline of Saturn to plan your future. Perhaps you have outgrown certain friends or associations, or there are lessons to learn that friends and groups can teach you. Watch for addictive tendencies. Saturn may crack the whip and make you work hard and long, just when you feel like escaping from it all. Gemini. Saturn transits your house of career, so you may experience challenges and changes in your work life or business. You may be forced to make changes or quit a job situation under duress. You could use this transit to recreate your career life if you have been unhappy in your job or chosen path. Saturn will connect you to your true dharma or life purpose. Situation and circumstances may take you to a new professional or a worldly path, kicking and screaming. The more you resist the changes, the more lessons Saturn will hand out. You could also become an authority in your career or take on more responsibilities and power, or simply retire. Cancer. Saturn transits your house of education and travel, so it's time to plan, plot out, and go on those long-awaited trips. Journeys far and wide beckon you. Retreats by the water, on the water, in the water are beneficial now. There may be new trainings or educational pursuits or degrees to pursue. Saturn will give you the discipline to matriculate, undertake it, and follow through any educational plans. This is also the house of legal issues. So be aware if you are involved in lawsuits or have to pursue legal intervention of some sort. Just do it carefully, and if possible, put it off until Saturn leaves Pisces, which isn't until 2026. Leo. Saturn transits your house of death, rebirth, and transformation. So all of this is on your menu for the next 3 years. Saturn, the Grim Reaper, may take friends or loved ones away from you during this transit. It will seem like more and more people are dying around you. You may also experience the death of a relationship or some other aspect of your life. The good news is that you can be transformed and experience a rebirth in some area or all realms of your life. Financially, Saturn says, neither a borrower nor lender be during this transit. Get your money house in order and watch for unnecessary expenses. Virgo, Saturn transits your relationship house, so there will be tests in relationships. A relationship or marriage could end, but you could also solidify a relationship or find yourself in a committed partnership during this cycle. Make sure your relationships don't demand too much from you. Ideally, the giving and receiving in relationships should be in a balanced flow and no one is taking too much. Watch for overgiving or self-sacrificing to maintain relationships. Libra. Saturn transits your house of health and service. This is a time to be vigilant with your health and take good care of your physical body. Respond to any health issues or symptoms promptly. Don't put off visits to doctors or other health practitioners. Tweak your supplement and diet regimes. Move, exercise, dance, move your body. Also, if you want to clear karma, offer selfless service to others in need. Scorpio. Saturn transits your house of children, and these are children of the body, mind, or spirit. It's also your area of recreation and creativity. It's time to turn the focus to your creative aspirations and find ways to bring them to fruition. However, you will have to be very disciplined in bringing forth creative pursuits. You may find yourself spending more time around children, whether they're your own or other people's kids. You're clearly seeing the responsibility and commitment of having or raising children and the importance of discipline. Sagittarius. Saturn is transiting your house of home and family. You might find yourself having more responsibilities with family members, whether they're aging parents, or you may need to discipline or be more available for your children. You may also have situations with siblings. It's a good time to fix any problems with your home or dwelling. The situations or issues with your home could come up during this cycle. Sometimes one has to move when Saturn transits this house due to circumstances out of their control. If a move is necessary during this time, there may be complications with finding another place to live. If one chooses to move, they may have more options than if they are forced to make a move during this time. Capricorn. Saturn is transiting your house of siblings, communication, transportation, and education. It is a good time to focus on pursuing education, not necessarily a degree, but trainings, workshops, and other educational opportunities of shorter duration. There may be problems with your car or vehicles, and you have to get a new one during the cycle. And it may be difficult to find an appropriate vehicle. Also, there could be issues with your siblings, which you have to get involved with. Make sure communications during this cycle are clear and concise with no room for misinterpretation. Your communications could be more powerful than usual, and you might find an outlet for writing or speaking. Aquarius. Saturn is transiting your house of money, resources, and values. Get very prudent where you are spending your money. Try to cut out extra expenses or lavish spending. Also, you can make a lot of money during this cycle if you focus on doing so and tighten your belt. Watch for the leaky boat syndrome, where the money comes in, but it flows right out again. You may notice your value system is changing, and what you spent money on in the past is no longer appealing to you. Try to stash money away and certainly save for a rainy day. I hope you enjoyed this episode about Saturn transiting through Pisces from March 7th, 2023 through 2026. Make sure you subscribe, download, share, and give us a 5-star review. This is Cosmic Scene with Jill Jardine signing out, sending you groovy Piscean, Saturnian waves of energy through the quantum field. Stop.